Welcome, viewers and listeners, back to the Arcade Attack podcast. I've got another super show, another super guest on today's show. I should say I've got Joe effing Cain, Joe Cain, the Sega and Atari legend. You were with us before, Joe, I think with our Sega testing pod, which
Yep,
was very
that's
popular.
right.
Thank you for your time there. And I think
Oh,
you
it was a
also
pleasure,
shared
man.
yeah, it was really good fun. It was actually really popular, actually. And
That's awesome.
we also you also shared a few thoughts on the Michael Latham tribute podcast as well, if
That's right.
correct. Before we talk about this is a great chance to get to know you a bit more, sort of intimately, a bit more personally, like one-on-one. Firstly, you've got your love. If YouTube viewers see already, but your name says Joe effing Cain. Are you happy to briefly explain where that name
It,
originated from?
yeah, it's kind of a funny. So, we're we're bumping into a lot of Michael Latham stuff. So there was a forum years ago. It was a game industry forum online. It was called fatbabies.com. And I don't know if you're familiar with Fat Babies at all. But it was basically like an open. So this is like pre-Facebook. I'm thinking like late '90s forum where it was just anything goes, and people could be, they could be anonymous if they wanted to be, or they could, put their actual name out. And at one point in time, I had gotten on there, and there was some thread about, people in the industry that you're, have it out for you or something along those lines. And Michael and I had, butted heads over various things, and at that time it was pretty acrimonious. And so I had written something to basically like, here's my, state of the union on what really happened. And when I signed at the end of my big written statement, my diatribe that I'd written, I typed Joe fucking Cain, and I went bam, and I hit enter, and I was like, take that, that was like my that was like my middle finger to the whole situation. But because I just wanted people to know it's me. Like, that's
Yeah.
not somebody pretending to be me. That's me saying these things, and you can quote me on that type of deal. So
And it's kind of stuck. Is that right? You sort of take that.
it has a little bit, yeah. I mean, I have some username somewhere, which is Joe, and I try to clean it up a little bit for certain venues. So I do
Yeah.
Joe EFFING Cain. But it's kind of fun. I mean, I'm a little bit of a, especially in my younger days, I was a little bit of a more bombastic,
Yeah.
free, very free to share my opinions with people, and let the chips fall where they may kind of deal. So,
Fair enough.
I think I've mellowed out a little bit like that over time. I definitely still have a temper.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
my lineage. I'm half Italian. I'm half German.
Oh,
So
okay, that's interesting.
it's in my blood to be a little hot headed, but I try to keep it under control, especially around the kids.
No, fair enough.
So
Just going to tell our listeners now and viewers that we did a big, like I said, podcast on your testing career. So we're not going to talk too much about your time
sure.
initially at Sega. We
Hmm.
can touch on it very briefly,
Yeah,
but there'll
sure.
be links in the show notes to go back to that. But one thing I don't think we spoke about previously, and we don't want to touch upon it, is Batman Returns, because as you know, and you very kindly
Mm,
listened to, we actually had a podcast on Batman Returns. We looked at the
right.
movie, and we looked at 3 of the games linked to it. And you listened to the podcast, and you gave some
I did.
brilliant sort of insight into, you were actually involved in testing it. So are you happy to share what you did with Batman Returns, what version you did, and go into a
Oh,
bit
of
of detail
course.
about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was funny because you had kind of tagged me in the link to the broadcast. I was like, what is this? So I went and listened to the whole thing, and yeah. So my experience with Batman Returns was basically that. So it came into test, and this was right around the time that the Sega CD was taking off. I think it was still. I don't know if it launched yet or not, but I think it was close to launching because I think we were testing on actual launch hardware. Um, so Batman Returns comes in, and it's basically the Batman Returns Genesis game, right? All the side-scrolling levels
Yeah.
from that, married with this CD content, which was the driving levels.
Yeah.
And there's a whole thing about that because the guys that did the driving levels for that ended up going off and doing Adventures of Batman and Robin for
Right.
Genesis. Those coders did the driving sequence for Batman Returns Sega CD. Then they did that Adventures of Batman and Robin, and then they did the CD version of that with those driving sequences, right? So they had
Wow.
built that engine, and so when it came to test, it was like, hey, here's this sort of Frankenstein thing where it's like, here's this code from Batman Returns Genesis, and here's the Sega CD code. Now you guys have to go test this. So so it was like, I'm playing the side-scrolling stuff and I'm finding bugs, and people are like, yeah, well, it's great, write those bugs down, but I don't know if we're actually gonna be able to do anything about that, because whoever coded that wasn't these guys. It was, they didn't do that Batman Returns base game. So it was like, yeah, you can write whatever bugs you want, but I don't know if we're going to fix them. So like, I'm sure there's stuff in there that I found or other people found that's still in that Genesis version that I could potentially recreate. But then we were testing the driving levels. And so, and the thing that was interesting to me about what your podcast was focused on was this whole like licensing thing, and that, the characters, which characters showed up and which didn't. So what I recall from when I was testing the game was that at one point in time, the Sega CD version had, so there's like a ending, when you die, there's like an ending screen with the penguin who shows up, and he kind of like zooms out and he's saying something sinister like, you can't win, or whatever he says. And they had sequences like that also with Catwoman and with Batman. And I can't remember exactly, like, if you're Batman and you're dying, why would you want to hear from yourself? I don't, whatever. But there was some reason, the different levels, they would play these different sequences. But Michael Keaton, this was very, very early on in the whole, like, digital world of, properties going across, not from just a movie screen, but a television to a video game. And they wouldn't apparently sign off on having their likenesses used for these other platforms. So they had to actually go through and toward the very end, take out those sequences with those two characters, because Michael Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer would not sign off on allowing their likenesses to be used. So I can only imagine that didn't just apply to just the Sega CD version, right? They must have had some sort of broader contractual situation that said, hey, if you're going to use our likenesses in any other media, you need to get our permission to do that. Maybe they just maybe weren't able to get that done in time, because especially anything with like a movie, anything that's like time sensitive, you can't wait around real long to get something taken care of, because if you pass the window where that thing is now in everybody's mind and relevant, they may never come back to it. So, some deadlines you have, because they're just written in stone that way. Like, if you're going to do anything with a sports game, you better get it out before the season starts. Or people are going to be like, I don't want to play, Madden 95 when it's, the freaking Super Bowl or something. So.
Oh, really interesting. Are you a fan of the Batman Returns films and the games themselves?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's all Tim Burton, right? So I remember like around that time, like, there was like Batman Returns was kind of a big deal because it was like, I wasn't really a fan of the first one so much. I liked Michael Keaton's character, but like, I don't know, I wasn't a like Jack Nicholson Joker guy. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, Kim Basinger's beautiful, but I wasn't connecting with the characters in the same way. And then Batman Returns kind of was like, oh, let's be kind of more, a little bit, maybe they went too campy, but it was more campy. So it was easier to it was lighter. It was easier to get into. I remember around that time I had read like a Batman graphic novel, which was really dark, like super, super dark. So I'm like, you've got, like, Batman for us in the States starts as comic book Batman. Like when you're a kid, maybe you read the comic book, but from a media standpoint, from watching characters, that was the TV show with Adam West. And it's all just complete camp, right? So Batman starts out serious, then he goes camp, then he goes like sort of serious again, then kind of camp again. Then I'm reading this graphic novel where he's like murdering people. I'm like, what is happening? Wow. Like, and I really like that grittier Batman. So, and again, Batman Returns wasn't that, but it was fun. And that era was very much sort of defined by, there was Tim Burton doing that. He did, Edward Scissorhands was, not terribly far from that. Then, Nightmare Before Christmas was a huge thing, and that's that same vibe, pretty much. So, it was. There was definitely things, games that went through tests or things we got involved in that were like fun to be involved in, because they were like, oh, this is pop culture, this is cool. Like this is,
Nice.
I'm into this thing, right? And then there was times when you get something and you'd be like, Three Ninjas Kick Back. What the hell is this? Like, like I don't want to have
that
anything
one.
to do with this. But
Yeah. Well, Joe, that kind of links me in nicely because MC Hammer, from Batman to MC Hammer,
yes.
two
Oh
completely
yeah.
worlds.
Yes.
I saw you tweet. I'll put your Twitter account
Yeah, you
in the
did.
show
Thank you.
notes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just want to say that MC Hammer game was in the works at Sega, and I think you were testing on it, or you might know some code into it. Are you happy to sort of spill the beans for that?
Yeah. So what can I tell you? So so we did definitely have versions in test. It was a full-on Sega CD game, and there is footage out there of people who, like, it was at a show or something, and there's like a 15-second clip of it.
Wow.
It was called Hammer. What was it official? I'm trying to remember the official name of the game. I was like Hammer versus Evil D in Soulfire.
Wow.
So like this was right when he was making, because he used to be MC Hammer. Now I grew up. He's a Bay Area guy, so I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm a 14-year-old kid, and my buddy's got mixtapes and whatever, and we're listening to MC Hammer. We're like, this guy's amazing, right? He's a rapper. He's from Oakland, and he's like, the Oakland A's bat boy who makes it big time. And so he was the coolest guy ever, right? So so now fast forward 5 years, 6 years, I'm in test, and this game's coming through. But before we actually even saw that game, he made a visit to the office.
Nice.
So you probably heard the Michael Jackson story.
Yeah.
But the MC Hammer story is he comes through the office and to kind of check out, and they just kind of take a spin through the whole department. And he comes by my cube, and I don't even remember. I wish to God I could remember what game I was testing at the time. But he comes by and he kind of like walks by and he sort of reverses course a second. He kind of looks over. He's like, "Oh, hey man, what are you testing? What are you playing over there?" I'm like, "Oh, blah blah blah." And he's like, he starts to regale me with like these tales of how, oh man, I'm a big Sega fan, and like, he's like, I've been like hours late starting a concert because I'm backstage with my boys playing Genesis, right?
Nice.
He's like backstage playing football, Joe Montana and stuff, and he's like, people are out in the crowd waiting for him to start the concert, and he's like, "Nah, man, I'm busy right now." He's like telling me this to my face.
That's great.
So it was pretty cool, man. I was like, he's like super down to earth, and everything I've understood from him, beyond that, he's just like super down to earth dude. Like my friend Dave Gray, who was telling me about a Zynga party that like Hammer had showed up at. He was like Hammer, like normally people are like asking you to take their camera, right, to take a picture with the celebrity. Hammer's handing his phone to people and saying, "Hey, take a picture of me with these people." Like he's like trying to be like, I want this for my memories. So I thought that was pretty cool. But it was at a weird time. So yeah, because he had gone from being MC Hammer to Hammer, and then people were like, "Oh, he's not." He was already getting a lot of critical feedback from other rappers, and so he's just a phony guy or whatever. And I don't know, I can't say, but I just know that his popularity had started to wane at that point, and I think that's probably partly. I mean, that game was in pretty rough shape.
Sometimes was it side scrolling beat?
It was this weird thing. So it was like a side scroller beat 'em up, and he could walk around, but even his walk was like he's like grooving walking, So he's like not even just like normally walking. He's like half dancing as he's moving around, and he could like shoot like fireballs. And there were these like ghost or ghoul characters or something. They had a name. They're like these weird spirits, and so he could basically like shoot them with these fireball things to knock them out. And it was just like this progression of side scrolling. So he could go get to Evil D, whoever Evil D was, and then defeat him, and that would then be the end of the game. Now, rumor has it that a former tester, who I shall not name because I don't want him to get his door beaten down, not by Sega legal, but for people trying to grab this thing from him.
Hammered down, you should say.
Yeah, hammered. There you go. Oh, I missed the pun. Oh gosh, I forgot you're a longer term dad than I am, so your dad joke game's stronger. Yes, hammered his door down. He apparently has a build on CD still. Somewhere in the development of this game, and there is a website I've seen that has like somebody who worked for the licensing group or the whatever the publishing group was going to be who did that game has like assets and has
Nice.
put them on a website so you can see like here's the animation cycle of one of his walks or his special move or something. You could see those bits and pieces, but to actually see it playing on a unit, like a actual like Sega CD hardware, there is a disc out there somewhere, and I'm trying to see if I can find it, get a hold of it.
That would be amazing.
Because I mean, yeah, I talked to Dave about it, and he has some crazy stuff too. But we're like, it's the history preservation angle of it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and this
yeah.
is becoming a real, I worked for Digital Eclipse. I not at the same time Frank Cifaldi did, but he's now doing this video game history organization, and I really appreciate what those guys are doing because like stuff gets lost every single day and you can't get it back. And I have some stuff, like as a matter of fact, I was bringing some stuff for show and tell. I have this right here with me. This cartridge right here has a version of Gargoyles for the Genesis on it, which is a pre-release version of Gargoyles. Dave helped me look at the ROM times about 8 days prior to the release ROM date.
Wow.
So it's pretty close, right? It's not so far off that it's probably not
Yeah.
all basically the same gameplay and stuff. But it's like, I just so happened to have that left over from helped write a strategy guide for it at the time, and somehow or another never ended up returning it. And then like years later, I was like, the heck is
That is
this?
interesting.
Oh crap! Plugged it in. It still works.
Oh, nice.
Right? It's all still there. So it's pretty amazing. But it's like, I hate to see stuff go to waste or just kind of disappear. And it's just too much of it, and there's too much history to let go of. So it's kind of a weird transition to go from Hammer to history, but I mean, I would like to see that thing preserved. And I would like to be able to have other people see that and enjoy that, because that's a piece of history, man. That's like, and it's weird for me to have this connection to it, right? Because, and who am I, right? I'm just some guy who I grew up loving video games and just so happened to get into Sega at the time that I did. Just so happened to run into all these people that I've run into, make these relationships, keep them over time, and then you just never know what you're gonna find. Sometimes, and somebody has something, they're like, I just picked this thing. What is this? And you're like, oh my god, it's like it's a prototype thing of something, whatever. It's like it could be anything. So it's wild, and it's the fun part of it is is finding the stuff. It's like you feel a little like Indiana Jones, but in the
of course,
of the digital realm. So
100%. Look, Joe, let's talk about, if you don't mind, why you kind of left Sega and why you, and how you end up at Atari, which I'm really interested to hear about. But were you
sure?
You were at Sega for a number of years, is that right? You're doing pretty well in the testing, or
yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's all right.
So I started at Sega in the September. It was September of 1992, and I've looked this up on a calendar. I think it was a Monday. I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was early September 1992. And I'd gone and interviewed sometime in August, I guess. And it's funny how it came about too, because I had graduated high school. So this is 1992. 1991, I graduated high school, and I didn't really know what the hell I wanted to do. Yeah. And I, kind of stumbled into this whole test thing, and just, again, right place, right time, right? Interviewed, did well enough to interview, get the job started. And then I was there until the fall of 95, which was like right around. So I had started at the time that Sega CD was brand new, and I left right around the time the Saturn was happening.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
32X had about happened and was actually almost about wrapped up. And then Saturn was on the horizon. And one of the last games I tested, I think the last game I was the lead tester on was Wild Woody for the Sega CD. Which, if you don't know it, go check it out. It's got its own whole weird history and background to it. But at that point in time, there was sort of a path in QA. You sort of start as a tester, and if you make it to permanent, then you have a shot potentially at, you can go into like being a supervisor. You could basically still be a lead tester if that's all you wanted to do. But if you wanted to advance, there was, the supervisor route. And then there was also the production route, so being an assistant producer for the production team. And we were so tightly packed with these guys, right? Like I used to walk by Michael Latham's, cube all the time on the way to lunchroom, or Ed Annunziata's cube was, somewhere else, or Bert Schroeder's cube was off somewhere. And these guys were all accessible, right? They weren't necessarily like ever present with us because they were doing their thing. But like the thing that was cool about Test back then was the producers really did look at us as a really valuable resource. Not just for our testing ability, but also like, hey guys, is this game actually even fun? Or hey, what kinds of things could you see us, we don't have a lot of time or resources to do anything super crazy, but do you see anything us tweaking anything here that would be? So they came to us, talked to us, and actually valued us, right? So, but as part of that, like I'm young, I'm 20 something, I want to advance in my career. And the production route is really the route I was wanting to go. And I was really holding out hope to work with, at one point in time, Michael, which that kind of evaporated because of our falling out. But Ed was really the person I really wanted to work with. And there were only so many roles that were available for producers to be opened. And it got to a point where it felt like, I'd been waiting for a little while, almost 3 years, and I just hadn't seen that opportunity really looking like it was going to come to fruition. So I decided, it might be time for me to sort of branch out. E3 was brand new at that time. And I had gone to the E3 show in that summer. And Atari had a booth there. I had written some resumes. I happened to drop one off at the Atari booth. They called me back.
With the Jaguar, I take it, were they?
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they called me back. I interviewed. They said, sounds good. And I got my first, full-time salaried position. Because at Sega, even though we were permanent, we were hourly employees.
Right. Yeah.
So we still had to fill out a timesheet and whatever. Atari was my first job where I was like a salaried employee. This is what you get paid for. This is your rate that you get paid and however many hours. And so, which is kind of a nice way of saying, please work a lot more than So we can get better value out of you. Please work more than what the 40 hours a week that this is sort of based on. But that's every company. That's not just Atari. But it was an interesting time for them because and I kind of had an inclination that things were not really going swimmingly over there when I went to interview. The building was a little bit of disrepair. It was just like the carpets were like, whatever carpets they had there in the 70s or 80s is the same carpets. They're real thin. Panels in the ceiling that, have water damage and are falling. So it's like, they kind of, I want to say cutting corners, but they just definitely weren't the same, and they don't think they didn't have the same leadership that they had when they started. And I think they were really just kind of trying to figure out what to do, because I think the Lynx was relatively successful for them, and the Jaguar, they really had high hopes for, but I think they just sort of, I don't know. I don't know what the marketing, scheme was like at the time. I think they just sort of painted themselves into a corner a little bit, because I think they tried to promise things out of it that it could deliver. And, I think if there had been a sort of a stronger, connection and push from management to sort of be like, hey guys, like we can do this, but we can't do this. Like, please don't go and tell people we can do Battle Arena Toshinden, because we really can't. So, but anyway, so I got hired, and pretty early on, I think I was more just kind of picking up like projects that were sort of close to being done. So because they're not going to try to throw a brand new guy into hey, go get this game off the ground tomorrow. You've never worked with these people before. You've never done a contract. You've never done, you don't even know our processes. Like, they were going to throw me in that type of water. So like, I think the first game I was assigned to was like Ruiner Pinball. And then I eventually, I think there was about 4 games that I worked on. There was Ruiner. There was Fight for Life, which was close to being done. And then I remember doing some work for, there was a Brett Hull hockey CD game that was being done, and there was also a Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam, which I think was just going to be called Charles Barkley Basketball. Both of those were going to be Atari Jaguar CD games, and Brett Hull needed some media done. So I was like, my job for a week was like, go get a bunch. We had these like archive tapes from the NHL of like highlights from actual NHL games. It was like, go sit down for 5 hours and like pick out the best highlights from this highlight reel so that we can use them to make a sizzle reel for the CD, like a track mode or something. Barkley Shut Up and Jam was a similar thing where it was like, hey, we need some sound effects for the stuff happening on the basketball court and guys running around and whatever. So I was kind of busy with that. And then I know at the time they were doing something. There was supposed to be. I heard about this more recently. I guess there was supposed to be like an exclusive Mortal Kombat 3.
Yes.
For
yes.
Jaguar. We had the machine in the office, and I was like, I'm not a big Mortal Kombat guy. Like I was always a Street Fighter fan, right? Sort of like if you have the sort of like the black and white world of Street Fighter or Street Fighter Mortal Kombat, I'm Street Fighter. The black and white world of Sega and Nintendo is from a fan standpoint, I'm Nintendo. But
okay, that's interesting.
I mean, even though I work for Sega, and I've definitely appreciated more in the past. But I mean, at the time, I was like Mario, Nintendo, Yoshi, blah. And in the fighting game world, it's Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat. But there's a free to play Mortal Kombat machine in your office. You can go play the fucking thing. So
that's pretty cool.
So I was playing. I was distracted by that a fair amount. So I was doing that, and then there was some stuff toward the end that was happening where I was actually going to get a chance to start a new game. So it's sort of weird timing too, because I'd gotten a phone call, and I don't even know how the phone call came to me. But the guy who did Crystal Castles for the arcade, Franz Lonzinger, had called, and he was trying to get the rights to Crystal Castles back so he could do a new version of it. Atari does not give up their IP to anybody. Doesn't matter if you created it or not. They're not handing it to you. So Franz calls again, somehow lands on my desk, and I'm like, hey, I used to play your game when I was like 10.
That's so cool.
And now I'm like 23. What the hell is this? So he was really super cool. Him and his partner, Mark Robachek, who created a company called Actual Entertainment. The tagline was, "We make games that are actually entertaining." We should have consulted with some marketing people, but whatever. But it was pure, and Franz really wanted to do a bang up, new version of Crystal Castles. That didn't happen, and so I was like, "Hey, really cool to meet you. Like, love to stay in touch." Didn't know where that was going to lead, which eventually did lead somewhere. But around the same time, and I can't remember. I think this was before. I had been talking to Bill Raybach, who's my boss, who I think you guys have spoken to.
We've had him on the past on the show, yeah.
Right, yeah. And Bill's a great dude. He was, or we were talking to this group called WaveQuest. WaveQuest did some very famous Super Nintendo games about dinosaurs that have health conditions. So Bronchi, the brachiosaur who has asthma, and I know there's another one. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but these guys were like Super Nintendo heads.
Nice.
And they were we started talking. I started talking to Bill about, because Bentley Bear made an appearance in Atari Carts.
He did, yeah.
And we started talking about wanting to do Crystal Castles, and he was like, "Oh, we've got this developer we could work with." So I was in discussions with them and trying to get a contract started. I remember feeling like I had to rush. I don't know that I knew that things were on the horizon about to collapse, but I was like, I kind of felt like I had to get this off the ground soon. So that was happening. I was trying to get that sorted. And then one other game was being worked on, and I cannot remember for the life of me what the name of this game was, but there was a Demolition Derby game on PlayStation at the time that was real popular. And somebody, sorry,
Destruction Derby, is it?
It might have been that one. Yeah, I can't recall for sure, but I know it was like early PlayStation, really, really popular title. And somebody at Atari wanted to do that on the Jaguar. And this company that was in Malaysia, who I forgot, I knew I needed to write this down, and I forgot to write it down. But they were apparently like very famous after that for doing a lot of handheld stuff, like Game Boy things. They were trying to do this Jaguar game.
Nice.
that was a 3D driving demolition derby game, and they
Wow.
were like trying to like squeeze crazy horsepower out of this machine
Wow.
that just wasn't intended to be able to, because it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
never intended to be a polygonal uh, uh, thing, but they were like, we could do 2D really well, and yeah, we could maybe try to blast some polygons out of this thing, but it's not really what it's built for.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think they just got caught in that wave of like everybody was thinking, okay, 2D, what's the next best thing in 2D we can do? Oh, they went 3D. Oh crap, we're caught with our pants down.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, that was a wild time. I mean, that was like right when the OJ trial was happening. So I remember like we were all like huddled around a TV in Raybach's office, like watching what's going to happen
That's
with OJ.
mad.
And probably one of my favorite memories there was when I was doing. So my voice is in Fight for Life multiple times.
I like that game actually.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I think
So,
it's I'm a big Jaguar fan. I like Fight for Life. I know it's got a bit of a. Not everyone likes it, but I think it's pretty fun.
I'm not gonna lie. For the longest time, I did not put that game on my resume because I thought it was gonna get me not looked at. But it was funny too because the game, when I saw it, I felt, and I'm a big fighting game guy, right? When I come in, so I'm like, hey, this game needs some help. It was doing some weird things, like the camera, like in the this is how I remember. Now I can't verify. I don't know if I've played a release build of this since, but I think this is how this works. What I recall when I was checking it out at the beginning was the characters did not automatically face each other. Like you'd start the round face to face,
Right.
but it was a full 3D thing. So like you could eventually get to a point where this character's like this and this character's like that, and they're like not looking at each other. So now I'm like kicking, and I'm kicking air over here. I'm not kicking you. You're walking this way. I'm walking that way. We're like miles apart in the arena, and there's no way for us to actually fight each other. So I was like, you guys got to figure out a way to, snap the camera so that you're at least facing each other at some point. And then the other thing I remember was all the characters had the exact same moves, same controls, same moves, every character. So I was like, well, what's the advantage of picking this character over that character? They're not any different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was supposed to be some sort of like RPG-ish thing where like the more you used a certain move,
you can unlock new moves and stuff, can't you?
Yeah. So, but I was like, dude, these characters have to have like a slate of moves that make them unique, right? And they have to have different controls to do these moves. So, I went and mapped out every single special move. Like here's what the control is now. Here's what it needs to be. Make this into a fireball, make this into a charge move, make this into whatever. So just to try to make the characters feel. So maybe I screwed that up. I don't know. I mean, to me, that was what made a character unique, right? That's what
I agree. Yeah.
To me, that was Street Fighter, right? Zangief has a spinning pile driver, and nobody else has that, So, but the fun thing for me was doing the voices. So I remember being a guy named Stan Weaver, who was a former Sega tester. He was the audio guy, and we'd come over around the same time, and we were like, dude, we need some voiceover work for this game. We don't have anybody to hire. This has to be us. So I recruited a few people from QA and myself, and I'm in the sound booth, and I'm literally screaming, like Stan's like, louder, louder. So I'm like, and it's not soundproof glass, right? So there's a whole office of people outside, and I'm just sitting there trying to be. I remember there was one guy who was like a military dude, and so I'm like, oh yeah, thank you. And I'm like screaming, like literally as loud as I possibly can get, and other people are just like, I see people walking by, just going, what the fuck is he doing, But that was actually like, and it was funny too, because then you hear yourself in the game, and I'm like, man, it's still too quiet. Like, the sound effects need to be louder. But that was so that was my like first ever and probably I think last voiceover work in a video game.
Oh man, I'm tempted, Joe, to power up my Jaguar after this interview.
Oh, you should, dude. Absolutely. I know. I did the military guy. I think there was a military guy. I did the boxer.
Yeah.
And I know I did I think I did two other ones. I have credit. If you look in the credits, it says it says voice work or something. My name is there, but it doesn't say like which character.
Yeah.
Someday I'll go through and I'll actually map out like I did that guy, I did that guy, I did that guy.
I've actually I've actually interviewed the person that made the game proper. I forget his name. So bad.
He was the AM2 guy, right?
Yeah, he had a big career before and after. I think he worked on Virtual Fighter as well, didn't he? And,
Yeah, that's kind of where they recruited, because he did,
Mm.
as I recall it, in Virtual Fighter 2, he did the Leon character,
That's right. Yeah.
and then they were like, "Hey, we've got to get somebody to come do this thing for us. Let's recruit that guy." And I mean, bless his heart, man. I mean, he's trying.
Yeah.
I know he was trying, but that system just had so many limitations, and they did have a fight, like Eric Wahlberg was the fight coordinator for Eternal Champions. They actually had another guy, I can't remember his name, but they had a fight coordinator guy for Fight for Life too, right?
Nice.
These guys were trying hard,
Yeah.
but that's the thing about software development, and especially in that era, right? No tools really,
Yeah.
no engines really. Everything is, you're just kind of like, you seat of your pants a little bit all the time, and bless your heart, no matter what you plan for, you aren't going to be able to execute exactly the way you want to. I mean, unless you have infinite time and money, which very few projects do.
Yeah.
And how many games got left on the cutting room floor? I mean, at a point in time when I was first in QA, they were doing at Sega, they were doing Jurassic Park, and that game got chopped. Like they had a whole media studio built just to do that game.
What, Sega, or is this Atari?
Yeah, it's Sega. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sega,
I don't mean to cross the streams, but
That's
I'm just
right,
saying. I'm just saying, like, no matter what you've got in mind, right? Like, you can make all these grandiose plans, and like it could be the smallest thing in the world that trips you up, right? Could be the license, becomes not popular, or all these ideas that you thought were going to go really well, you take it to focus test, and people are just like crapping all over it because it's not what they want, so it's rough. And I've seen a lot of games do that too, where they get partway through and then they have to like really quickly like change it up, make it do some stuff that was never really meant to do. And that's probably part of the reason why I would say Fight for Life, specifically, could be a little rough around the edges, because it's doing a bunch of stuff right at the very end that it was never really built to do, and trying to make it work.
I heard rumors, Joe, that the game they released, the final Fight for Life, wasn't the finished product, and actually there might be a code for an even better version that never actually made it out. I don't know if that's true or not.
That's interesting. The sad thing is, from that period of time, I have almost nothing from Atari. Like, I have a bunch of Sega stuff. I have almost nothing. And the saddest part of that is I had an opportunity to go do that. The two buildings Atari had left at the time were the development studio and the warehouse. So your boy goes to the warehouse by special invite from, I was friends with one of the secretaries there, and her husband was the guy who ran the warehouse. So he sends me, "Hey, let's go to the warehouse, check it out." Yeah. I am not kidding you at all. An entire Indiana Jones sized warehouse full of pallets of boxed Jaguars and Lynxes and Jag CDs stacked to the freaking rafters, bro, like higher than my head. And we're walking around, and we're looking at stuff, and one of the Trammell brothers had his personal collection of arcade games in the back. So he had like a couple Battle Zones, he had a Pong, he had some Missile Commands.
Was this like Leonard Trammell?
No, that's not Leonard. There was Jack was the dad, Sam was the president, Leonard was the tech guy. And I love Leonard. Leonard was really cool to me. And there's another brother, and I cannot remember his name, but it was his.
People
stuff.
shouting us out, aren't they?
I'm sure somebody's going to tell me. But yeah, so he had his stuff back there, and then there was hi. Wow. Now I'm being invaded. That's my son, Thomas. You want to say hi?
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, Tom.
Hi. That's my boy, who's 9 years old and wears the clothes of a 13-year-old. Hey, buddy. Can I talk to you later? Please. Okay. Okay. Well, get back to me on that later. Let me know if I can talk to you later. And take the dog with you too, please.
Okay. But why?
Do we need to pause for a second?
What is your name?
I'm sorry. I thought I was very clear.
What is that name? What is that name?
Oh yeah, don't look at he's looking at my name.
Not appropriate.
Oh my gosh. All right. Bye.
Busted.
Bye. Good to see you. I guess you can leave the dog if you have to. Close the door, please. Thank you very much. I love you. Oh my gosh. All right. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Where was I?
Well, I want to talk about the Tremels actually because we've Leonard.
All right, so
yeah.
real quick, warehouse. They sent me through the warehouse. You take whatever you want. There's a small box in the back of like old 2600 games, and I grabbed one of those. Not a Jaguar, not a Lynx,
not a Jag
CD. All of which, because I'm thinking like, who wants this crap? They can't even sell it. Apparently, some dude bought all that stock, and he is making his living off of just parsing out, a couple of systems a month. They're crazy right now.
Well, anyway. The Jag CDs. Anyway. I heard rumors there are only like 10, maybe 20,000 ever made. I don't know if that's true.
Oh, it was a very small amount for sure. I mean, and like there's sort of a tragic design element to them too. They don't look very nice. they kind of resemble a toilet.
They do. But I used to own one, Joe.
What did you do with it?
I had to sell it in the end. To make some money,
man,
I regret it. I do regret it in a way.
What a bummer. Yeah, those are definitely a piece of history for sure.
They're amazing, aren't they? Do you personally own a Jaguar or a Jag CD?
I own a Jaguar. Yeah, I bought one from. So there's a game store that I've been going to. I found it open last summer. It's called the Experience Share. Anybody in the Bay Area, go to the Experience Share. Hi, Marvel. I love that store, and I really like helping him out because he's a really good guy, and he really has that. He's a Sega fan too. But he's also an Atari fan, and he happened to have a so get this. He has a Jaguar kiosk in his store with the original monitor, the original Atari monitor, which went out on him, and I had to help him find somebody to come fix it, and now it works again. But he has the kiosk, which is awesome. But he happened to have a Jaguar in the store, and I've been, like trading him stuff. He gives me pretty decent values for my trades, and I had a bunch of store credit, and I was like, "Hey, Jaguar, I'll take one of those."
Nice.
So I have it. Haven't hooked it up yet because I eternally have no time to play any games. But yeah, I think there's actually some more. I don't know. Is there more Atari lore you want to get into?
Well, how about the Tremels? Were they? Because I don't want to speak ill, but I heard that they can be sometimes quite difficult to work with, or some quite tough boss. What was your personal?
So my experience was pretty limited. Again, I was only there for 4 months. My understand. So again, Leonard to me was awesome, right? Like super sharp guy, super friendly. He I think was sort of like in a sense he was more of sort of like the beating heart of Atari because he was the one who I think really had the most investment in making that system be all it could be, right? And so I really appreciated, again, in a very short span of time, I got to know him. And it was sad too, because after that, there was no Facebook or anything after that. So I completely lost touch with everybody there that I wasn't already friends with, say, from Sega. But Leonard was great. The other Tremel brother, which I mentioned, I can't remember his name. I don't think he was really too involved. I don't know for sure. He might have been doing some big deals or something behind the scenes. Sam, as president, I didn't know anything. I heard some things later that maybe he was having some health problems or something. I was not aware of this. I felt like, and if I'm being honest, like I just felt like he was a little out of touch because we'd go to meetings and we'd be talking about, hey, what game should we be doing? And he was, it was more of like whatever his son liked, he was like, I like that. It was less about, I think, him having a good. And again, I don't know this for sure, but like good instincts about, what's popular or what we should be doing, or having sort of a guiding principle or, thrust to the, like, this is what Atari is, right? I wasn't getting that impression from him about that. And of course, Jack was, I don't even know how involved Jack was at that point in time.
Yeah, fair enough.
At all. But Leonard was my guy. I mean, I really appreciated the fact that, and Bill, again, my boss, Bill, Jay Patton, who was also a producer there, who then went on to Sony for decades, I think. Both those guys, the production team to me seemed very solid. Like they really wanted to do things as well as they could, but I think they were also a little bit more realistic about what the Jaguar could actually do, right? And not trying to expect, there's only so much you can squeeze out of this thing. And I think they were, Bill's a tech guy. He understood the tech. I think he kind of knew, like, okay, we can't really ask for a whole lot more than than what we're getting, and if we need more than that, then we need to do something different. And that's, I think, where the new development was headed.
Mortal Kombat 3, really briefly, just if you can remember any more, Joe, because it's one of those really mythical Jaguar games that, honestly, if you go on the Atari forums, people will know as much as possible. I know. Is there any more you can tell? Did you ever see people working on it, or how far did you ever see? Was it just all discussions before, or?
That's tough, man. I mean, like I said, I absolutely remember the arcade machine. I mean, I was in there quite a bit, and I want to say that there was some development group up there doing something with it, but I honestly, like, I don't recall ever seeing a build, or something running on hardware. I don't remember seeing a prototype. But I mean, it was definitely happening, right? Like, there was the fact that there was some kind of, and it really should have happened too, because I mean, that's Midway, right? That's Atari's sister, group, basically. So I don't know why it didn't, other than maybe they realized, like, hey, you know what, we could do this, but this isn't really going to get us, where we want to go. This is not going to drive the sales, or pick this platform back up off its because it definitely had fought. I mean, I remember seeing discounted hardware, from the 32X on, right? Like, as soon as the system back then was not happening, it was like on sale, fire sale, get rid of this thing. Like, Jaguars were, I think, probably being sold for, in the beginning, I think they were like 300. And I think after a while, stores were trying to just, give us $50, please, and take it. Like,
so I love the system. I have to say, I do enjoy playing the Jaguar.
It can do some great things, and I mean, like, one of the guys. So, kind of not to lead too far into the future, but one of the guys I ended up working with, who worked with Franz when I worked for him later, he did Trevor McFur for that system.
Yes.
And so he, I don't know how well that game is sort of like received in the community, in the larger community, but I mean, that's a shooter, right? It's a shooter, and it works on that platform. It didn't try to do too much. And I think that's what I noticed a lot of games that were really trying to do really much, a whole lot more than they really could pull off. And I think that sunk them, because I think that was the thing where it's like, they're trying to make promises like, hey, we could compete with these other systems. We have 64 bits, and it's just, and then you look at the games and you're like, what are you doing? I see about 10. What are you doing with the other 54? So
what's the best game on the Jag in your opinion? Which one do you reckon pushes the
console? I mean, okay. I would say Doom, just based on what I've seen of it, right? But the fact that it has no audio, like, Carmack apparently had to borrow the audio processing to actually make the game work. But the coolest thing I have seen, and it's actually at Marvel's store on his kiosk, he has Tempest 2000, but he has the controller that has the dial on it.
Oh, the rotary controller.
Yes. So what's really awesome to me about this is that Jeff Minter programmed that game to work with that dial before that dial had ever been commercially made. It never got commercially made. And then decades down the line, somebody goes and actually makes it.
That's crazy.
And then it works. It works with the game, and you don't have to do anything crazy. You just plug it in, and boom, this piece of hardware that was always intended to be available but never actually built now exists and now works. That to me is fucking amazing.
It's a great game, actually, as well. Tempest.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the thing, man. What's funny to me is, like, what's the alchemy like in these guys? There's guys out there that just understand how to do stuff, and then they make crazy stuff. And I mean, I don't know what kind of galaxy brain experience. Like, you have to have some kind of experience or something in your life or whatever. But I mean, I'm just in awe, because those guys can make really magical things happen on a screen, and that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Can you give me one moment?
Yeah.
Because I feel like this dog is breathing heavily, and I don't want to overtake the conversation.
That's all right.
I'm gonna make a dog exit a room, and I'll be right back. Come on, dog. Let's go. Yep. 1, 2, 3. Yep. Head on out. That direction. There you go. Yep. Don't sit on my stuff. There you go. You got it. Okay. Good dog. Good dogs here. Go on. Yeah. Okay. Good dog. Thank you. And I'm back.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's
I
all
felt like I know she there's times when I'm on the phone with people and there's this like silence from me and all you hear is this panting in the background. I just imagine what people are thinking.
Yeah. No, I've got a couple of cats. And
I swear it's the dog.
Yeah.
I swear it's the dog.
Joe, are you happy to speak? Because obviously you were at Atari for 4 months. Unfortunately, things went belly up at the end, and the company pretty much closed down. I know there's the Atari brand now, but it's not quite the same. But before it closed down, you said to me offline there was some rumors, some chat about like a new Jaguar, a new console, like the last throw of the dice almost. Would you say it's fair?
I would say yes.
Are you happy to share that kind of whatever you heard, whatever development, when even if it's just discussions or ideas? I know our listeners would love it.
So what I remember distinctly, and I'll go back to Leonard. So Leonard was at one point, I remember, and I don't know how, if it was just sort of like general conversation or he was talking to somebody else and it was in passing, but he'd been on that track for a while of trying to get the Jaguar 2 off the ground. Now, so if you rewind a little bit, so Atari puts out the Jaguar, they put out the Jag CD, it's not really going too well, and they are like, if we're going to compete, we really have to come up with something special. So I think that was sort of Leonard's like project, was like, we got to find a way to put ourselves back on the map. And so what I recall is the Jaguar 2 was supposed to be effectively backwards compatible, right? So there was going to be a single chip. So if I'm understanding the architecture of the original Jaguar correctly, there's 2 chips, those Tom and Jerry. Those were supposed to be combined into one chip. So it would be, and I remember hearing Leonard saying like, "Oh, we're getting really close. Like we're getting really close to having that combined chip working."
Right.
So that basically they could have a system where, okay, you've got Tom and Jerry on one chip, you plug in a cart, it'll be compatible. You could play whatever you played on the Jaguar on it, but then it would also have extra horsepower in other ways. And I think it was going to be more along the lines of a more modern like 3D system, with at least the capacity to do polygonal generating polygons rather than always just focusing on this 2D thing. And so again, the discussions I can recall are, him saying like, "Hey, this is getting really close. Like it's almost working." And I know that they were leaning, into the idea of, hey, now we're going to have to start like lining up people to develop, games for this new thing. Now, I don't know how far that actually got off the ground in terms of, did they actually sign any studio or talk to any studio with specifically say, hey, we need you guys to make this game for the Jag 2. But, I know that it was happening, right? It was in motion. But again, it's such a weird time because like you've got, and I don't even know how most companies handle this normally, right? You've got the sort of the momentum of trying to like, we've got to wind this thing down. We got to wind one thing down sort of before we spool another thing up. And, which to draw back to Sega, I don't know if Sega ever did that effectively. But Atari, obviously they only had really one system to do because the Lynx was around, but it wasn't like a focus. Yeah, really. And so, I really wish I had more insight into that at the time. But I mean, mostly what I was focused on was kind of wrapping up the projects that I had been, had thrown at. And I honestly don't remember if it was a discussion point, like when I was like this Crystal Castles thing I was talking about. Like, I don't recall there being like, hey, what system are we going to do this for, as being part of that discussion. So hard to say. I think it was probably one of those things where like, it wasn't real enough yet to start going to people and saying, we know we can count, like, here's something that we can give you a spec or something that you can
Yeah.
count on to start building against, right? It was more of like pie in the sky. We know we want to do this, and this is what we think will be good, but it wasn't really. I mean, if anybody, I mean, man, I would love to see if anybody has anything from that era from that, because I mean, just to verify what I remember. But that's how I recall it. Leonard was definitely motivated, and he was really pushing to try to get that. But I mean, it was like all sorts of challenges, right? Like, you're trying to take, architecture that's, these two separate pieces of architecture and combining them into one thing and making it small and making it cost efficient. And I think that was just a big ask at the time.
I wonder if it would have been a CD as well, a CD console.
I don't know. But I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard that the Jag CD is kind of breaks down easily. Is that true?
Yeah, the one I never broke, to be fair, but I've heard it can easily break. You can push down the little dial bit, the spinning thing. It's quite delicate. Ooh. Yeah, you've got to be very careful with it.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some Sega CDs that I've been trying to get repaired. Just the laser alone is like, that could be the make or break point. So.
The Jag, anyway. the Jag 2. What could have been, eh?
I would have. Yeah. Personally, I would have liked to have seen it, but there's a part of it's more of the nostalgia part, I think, where it's like, and I've said this to folks before. It's like, a lot of people are like, oh man, I really wish Atari would, get the band back together, or Sega would do this or whatever. It's like, it's never going to be that again. There's just no way it can be. Because you're a prisoner of that moment where you've got your limitations, whatever they might be, in front of you, and you've got to learn how to work around them. And we don't have that problem anymore. Like, if anybody was going to do that now, it'd be like, hey, I could take this Super Nintendo and just tack on 8 gigs of memory to it. What can I do with that? It's not really the same thing.
No, it's not, is it?
So, but I do think that again, their hearts were in the right place. The goal of trying to make Atari live on and be that thing that people could that beacon of this is my temple of gaming greatness. What they wanted, I think they wanted to deliver on that, but I just don't know that I don't know that it really could ever have been that, but B, the amount of effort it really would take it to make that all happen, right? That was an era where you couldn't really, unless you were Nintendo, you really couldn't survive on first party stuff. You really needed the help of third parties to get involved and make a lot of great stuff for your system. And I just don't know that that would have been a real uphill climb for them in that era, because I think because PlayStation was like, oh my God, PlayStation's hitting, everybody's got to get on that. And everything else was sort of like, you might want to do something for another system, probably more because you couldn't necessarily, beat the rush to the PlayStation or deliver on there like other folks could. So you had to, change your target.
It's so sad, and I've got so much love for the Atari, actually. But Joe, are you happy to reflect on your sort of final days at Atari? Were there people being fired left, right, and centre? Was it very cutthroat? I mean, I'd love to hear firsthand how it went down those final few days.
This is what I remember.
Yeah,
I remember being totally blindsided by it.
Right. Okay.
I did not have any expectation that this was coming. I mean, it was one of those things where you were like, wow, this company's really been kind of struggling for a while. He's sort of just kind of treading water. Where is the end for this? And I wasn't just thinking even in in that exact words, but it was like, man, I joined up thinking kind of one thing, and now it's sort of become this other thing. And I didn't really know what to expect, but I certainly was not expecting coming into the office and then being like, you could kind of see, like, I think some people knew I don't think it had happened by the time I got there, really broadly, but I think you could tell the looks. I could see some people's faces like,
oh no,
what? Why does that person look sad?
Weird atmosphere,
yeah. What's going on here? And I think it was probably not too much longer after the day started. Maybe it could have been 10 o'clock, 10:30, something like that. and they sort of started making, pulling, hey Joe, can you come into my office type of situation. And there was one woman who worked there. Her name was Sally Lebrec, and she was I think she was more of like a what's the word, assistant, like not a producer, but like a personal assistant.
Yep.
And I could see this look on her. She was crying, and I was just
no.
like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" And it became clear very quickly that like this was the purge. Like, if they were basically going to have to cut it down to the absolute bare minimum just to kind of wrap operations, basically, right? Like Atari was not going to continue on as it was anymore. They had to let all these people go, and then they had to keep some skeleton staff to kind of like, hey, because there's legal things, right? We have to close these contracts. We have to, deal with the real estate stuff. We have to deal with the, open whatever accounts, right? Developer accounts and stuff like that. So there was a small amount of people that had to stay, but development wise, like my understanding, the whole thing got cleared out. Maybe some QA were left over. I think you guys I thought I saw you guys had some kind of a chat with Tal.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, he's been on a text interview again on this.
Yeah. So he was in QA there at the time, and I know, so he might know more from what happened on that side. But the saddest thing for me, I mean, aside from obviously losing my job and suddenly having to say goodbye to these people that I had just really started to get comfortable with. When we were working, we knew we were going to work on the Crystal Castles game. I actually went and picked up an arcade upright unit for research purposes, and I had it in the office. And as I'm walking out, I'm looking at it going, oh, what's going to happen to that thing? I'm not taking that home.
Oh,
I was like, damn it.
Where is it?
Damn it. I don't know. But I mean, it was just something at the time I was going to like, there's these arcade auctions that were happening.
Yeah.
And I was going to a lot of those. And I think I don't remember if I bought it from an auction or somebody that I knew from an auction or something. But I was like, oh, I'm going to let that, like, actually, I can't do anything about that. It's gone. Goodbye.
No.
So I just say farewell to my little machine that I was so happy to have. Later I got one, so I was fine. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely like, I just remember like thinking about, on my, because I think we left pretty early. I think I was at the time I was getting like rides in from somebody, either Stan or this other guy, Blair, that we worked with, because my car had broken down. So I was getting rides, and it was like, oh shit, we all just lost our jobs. Well, I guess we're going home early, and that was that. And that led me down kind of an interesting career path after that, because I didn't really know. Here I am, like I'm like, I get out of test, I'm like, I made it, I'm a producer, and then like 4 months later, I'm like, I'm not a producer. Oh, what am I gonna do? So, it was some choppy waters for a while there, but I do recall it was very somber, and a lot of people that and again, I had only been there for 4 months, but a lot of people that were there had been there for quite a while working with each other, and they all just had to say goodbye, like on a moment's notice.
No, it's not funny, is it? I shouldn't be laughing.
It's not. No, I mean, but I mean, I get the amusement in it. As far as like, it's like you look at something afterwards, it's like easy, but in that moment, it was just like, wow, man, what's going on? And your mind immediately starts going to places, and I didn't have kids or anything at the time, so. It was, my son now just shows up. I didn't have kids or anything, so it was just me that I had to worry about. But it was also, you look back on it later and you're like, man, it wasn't just me that it was impacted; it was all these other folks too. So that's
bless you. Yeah, no, bless you.
Pardon me for one more moment.
That's all right.
I will be right back. Okay, sorry. I really thought I was done with that.
That's all right, Joe, no problem.
Is this the part where we transition into kids talking about what it's like to be a dad?
Yeah.
Believe me, I love my son. I never thought I would be a dad. And the funny thing that I was thinking about earlier today was you told me you had your kids really young, or you started.
Yeah, very young. I was really young dad, actually.
So I think I became a dad in like timeline and lifeline about 20 years after you first did.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And I never thought I would have kids at all. I just didn't even think I was like the right temperament for kids. I'm not. I don't think anybody would go back in time who you could talk to and ask, is Joe Cain a patient person? Probably not going to get too many yeses out of that question.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me because Thomas, who you just saw flopping on my bed behind me, he does have challenges. He's on the spectrum, and he has his issues with impulse control and other things. And for a time we didn't even know if he would talk. Like he wasn't verbal for like 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
And now fast forward to this point in time, you can't shut him up. And I love and I say that in a loving way because it's like you went from this point in time where we're like, is this is he going to function, to he's actually really high functioning.
Yeah. Good on you, Joe.
But it's scary. And I don't know if you had this moment, Adrian, but like the minute he was born, I was a dad. Like, oh my God, it's like
It's crazy.
Switch flipped big time.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at you, dude, because like if I think about myself at 18.
Man, it was crazy times.
No way in the world I'm not throwing myself off a balcony.
Yeah,
like,
he's about to finish uni now. My son back there.
Wow.
So yeah, it was tough.
Gosh,
I'm not going to say it was the
man.
easy time, but
this is the cool thing for you too, is that now does it feel weird? I'm the interviewer. Does it feel weird to have a son who's really not that much younger than you? I mean, in the grand scheme of things.
No, it feels crazy, and he's done very well for himself as well, actually. So you never know if you're going to be a good or bad dad, do you? So it's tough, but I'm proud of him. He's about to finish uni. He's a nice kid, and he's very polite. And yeah, it's crazy.
But what's cool for me is to see the different ways that you can like, not that you've tried to influence them a particular way, but like things that you do, or things that the way that you are, and the things you impart to them, and how they take those things in, like. And some of it's very natural too, right? Like we were just visiting with my wife's dad and his girlfriend last night, and she was telling me, she's like, "Oh, Thomas is so sweet. He's so caring." And it's like, I'm not teaching him that necessarily. I mean, I obviously want him to be, nice and care about people, and we talk about how you treat people, and do this, don't do that. But the fact that he's just very naturally like loving and caring, like. That makes me happy because, I don't have to worry about him being the kind of person that, might, get things wrong in life. And, he's very pure in that way. And, he very purely wants to come and be a part of what's going on right now. So I try not to, I don't want to be too hard on him, but,
bless it. Nice.
But it is funny because, like I said, I had no inclination at all. I mean, some people I know are like, man, they grew up the whole time. I really want to be a dad. I'm like, I can hardly see 2 feet in front of my face most times. Like, I try to think about how to take care of somebody else. Like, what?
I mean, you play video games with him and stuff.
Salute you.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
I do. I tried. He plays more with his mom though. His mom's a gamer. My wife's amazing that way, and in a lot of ways. And partly the fact that she's patient as hell with me, but no, she's it's funny. I was never like a first person shooter guy. Like even when like Doom came out and Quake, I was like, I kind of eventually got into it. But she's like super. She plays everything, but she's a super like more like FPS stuff.
Nice,
so
yeah.
And she'll play anything with him. They're probably playing 7 Days to Die right now.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
But they play, PUBG. They play, you name it. Whatever he's into, whatever she's into. He's mama's boy right now for that. Maybe someday he'll get the bug and come down my road, because I'm like, as a gamer, like, I don't shy away from action stuff, but I'm much more like, for me, like the cerebral puzzler type,
Oh, okay.
dude, like Portal, fucking
Yeah, that's a
that
good game.
that game for me was like, that was a light bulb moment of like, this is what I've been waiting for my entire life.
Yep.
Right? Like, there's like, to me, in the world of games that I've been exposed to, there are 3 perfect games: Tetris,
Yep.
Street Fighter, Portal. That's it. That's it. That's my list of 3
2 puzzle
perfect
games.
games.
Well,
But I mean, I've been like that. But puzzle games can also be like hectic and like Tetris gets crazy.
It does, yeah.
Did you ever play? There was a game called Blockout. Did you ever play Blockout?
I haven't played that, no.
It's like 3D Tetris. Like, it's like a well.
Oh, okay, that sounds pretty cool.
Man, that game's intense. I was playing that with Dave Gray on PC like way long ago. It's like the idea of like, thinking and doing, and not to say that these shooters aren't that, but there's that analytical puzzle element to it, where it's like, kind of this open-ended thing, and that's really like my style. Like, for me as a gamer right now, what I have the most time to play: chess.
Right.
I'm still hacking away at it. I still suck for the most part. I'm okay. I make dumb mistakes all the time, but it's like, but that's the thing. I can stop and put 5 minutes or 10 minutes of my day into that. It's so daunting to think about, like, sitting down. Like, I bought the Diablo 2 remake and I really want to play it.
Yeah.
But man, do I have 2 hours to sit down and really enjoy it?
You do need that sort of time. Yeah.
So I don't even want to start, because, it's like, I feel like I'm going to get dragged away from it. And, dude, my interests are all over the map right now. I'm so, it's like shiny thing. Oh, go get the shiny thing, sealed games. I need to buy that. So I'm doing all sorts of weird stuff. And
well,
it's
we'll talk about your collection in a minute.
Oh yeah.
If that's all right, Joe.
Is it? You tell me, man.
Before we go there,
Sure,
are you happy to, after Atari,
I'm happy to do anything for you, Adrian.
Oh, you're a gentleman. But after Atari, obviously you lost your job, but not the best time. But where did your career take you after that? Because I think you tried to get a job back at Sega. Is that right, Joe?
Everywhere. My turn. This is the coolest thing about being in the industry to me is, like, okay, let's say I'd gotten my wish and I'd stayed at Sega. Yeah. I might have made a bunch of different contacts. I might have been a producer. I might have worked with a lot of different dev studios. Who knows, right? I wouldn't change. I really wouldn't change anything, in the sense that what happened after Sega sort of forced me down a certain path, in the sense of, I really had to get creative, in the sense of, what am I going to do? Right. So I went and worked for Atari. Atari blows up. I go back to Sega, and, frankly, we had this little discussion before. Mike Latham, not too hot about me coming back to Sega, and kind of blocked me on that. So some of the producers at Sega were super cool, and like Ed and Unziata, who I'm still really good friends with. Just had lunch with him at GDC, as a matter of fact. He was like, hey, I need some help doing some testing on Three Dirty Dwarves. Can you do some Three Dirty Dwarves testing? Steve Apor calls me in. He's like, hey, can you test Bug for me? Right. Because I still had that kind of reputation of being that guy. Right. So they were helping me out. It was awesome of them. My favorite project, Bert Schroeder, who, again, the Batman fame, at the time Mario 64 was brand new. He goes, hey, Joe, I really want to see everything that's in Mario 64. Can you make me a videotape of a playthrough? Get all 120 stars.
Wow.
I'll pay you $500.
Wow.
I said, when can I start? And actually, because at the time, I think I was working, my ex-wife and I used to write strategy guides, and I think at the time we were doing something for that. So I was really familiar with the game. I was like, yes, dude, I can do this for you right now. Nice. So I kind of got a little bit of a float from that work. I did very briefly work in QA for Crystal Dynamics. And that was a weird time, though, for them, because that was like, they had a lot of Hollywood money, and then suddenly the Hollywood money got pulled away, and Crystal Dynamics was sort of like adrift. And so I did that for a short period of time. It was about long enough that summer comes around again. So this is late 95, I lose my job at Atari. Now we're getting to late 96.
Yeah.
And I get a phone call from Franz, who I had made contact with at Atari. And he's like, hey, we need some help finishing up our game that we just did in the last year. Can you come and work for me? And I said, hell yeah. So
Nice.
I went and did some QA on that game. And then it got to a point where it was like, okay, well, we're done with this game. What are we going to do next? And it's like, let's do a sequel. And it was weird too, because
what was the game called? Crystal.
No, sorry. So Crystal Castles, could get Crystal Dynamics and Crystal Castles. So work for Crystal Castles, left Crystal Dynamics. Go to work for Franz at Actual Entertainment.
Yes.
Work on a game called Gubble, which is a spiritual successor to Crystal Castles.
Oh, okay. Yep. Gotcha.
And then it's like, we could do a sequel. Well, right around the time we're getting ready to kick off the sequel, Franz leaves the company.
Eesh.
Which was, and he even told me, he kind of told me, yeah, I kind of regret how that went down. Whatever. We're like, hey, we're still running. The studio's still running. We still got to make the game. Let's go. So we make a game, and now I inherit basically the lead design, lead producer hat, magic hat. Boom on my on my not now bald but not always bald head. So that was my first game where I was like the lead. And it was a dream come true in a lot of ways, because I kind of got to do whatever I wanted. Like, hey, I've got an idea for an enemy. I've got an idea for this new mechanic. I've got an idea for whatever. And I'm working with the sound guy to get the music done, who's this guy who's off in some Scandinavian country somewhere, who I've never met, but he did the music for our other game and he did the sound effects for other games. So he's going to do the sound effects and music for this one. I'm everywhere, dude. And again, I was single. I was married, but I mean, or almost married, but I'm like, I've got all the time in the world to focus on this thing. And so this becomes my baby in a lot of ways, right? So Gubble 2, check it out. It's a thing. It's all PC games at this point.
Right. Yeah.
At one time we got approached by, oh my God, what was even the name of this there was a hardware product that came out in that same period that it was like a platform that never went anywhere. We never did anything with it, but it was just like a wild time, right? PC. And now my network is like expanding in a weird way, because I'm in a very small studio, but I can talk to anybody, and GDCs are happening and E3s are happening, and people from Sega that I know are going all over the place. So it starts to kind of expand my horizons in different ways, where if I'd stayed at Sega and been very insular, I don't think I would have had that, right? I had to grow. I had to do something new and different, because I really didn't have a choice. So I was very lucky that Franz, contacted me when he did. I worked for Actual for about a year and a half. I had this tendency to work at places for about a year and a half. I don't know why. Actual starts to run out of money. No more Actual. Then I end up, Ed Annunziata has started a new studio called And Now, and he's got some games that he's working on and he needs help with. So I go work for him, and I'm initially doing, production work. So, and I'm picking up random stuff like, Tiny Tank was one of the only games that was published by that studio. Tiny Tank needs testing help. Tiny Tank needs marketing help. Tiny Tank needs localization. Tiny Tank needs to have the master disc burned for the Sony submission. Guess what, Joe?
That's your job.
What you doing tonight? Here, fast forward to Joe with the single speed CD burner. Single speed.
Wow.
Full disc burner, burning master copies of the launch game that has to go to Sony, which is just over the hill, which I have to drive and deliver on 0 hours of sleep after I've been burning discs literally for 24 or about 20 hours.
Wow.
And they're single speed, and they have to verify at single speed too. And you have to have a certain amount of verifies and a certain amount of not verifies. And I'm sweating bullets, setting alarms, trying not to disturb the unit because it's super sensitive.
Yeah.
And I'm doing all sorts of crazy stuff for And Now. And then And Now starts to flounder a little bit, unfortunately. They had a contract with GT Interactive, and GT Interactive that time had shut down. So now they're like, oh, we've got all these agreements we had to do these games have just vanished. What are we gonna do? So I don't want to be a burden to Ed, and it's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my career is leave that job, because I,
Mm.
if anything, and I don't, not to pat myself on the back, sort of loyal to a fault in the sense that I'll go down with the ship, but I could maybe afford to go down with the ship more back then than I could now.
Yeah.
But I also was like, I still have a career and I still have to, I still have to pay bills and I still have to do things. So and I don't want to be a burden. That was a tough conversation with Ed, because I'm like, dude, you're my hero. Like, he's one of my two heroes in gaming is Franz and Ed.
Yep.
I've worked for both, and one left before I could leave. The other one I had to leave, and I was like, dude, Ed, I'm so sorry, but I just can't do this. 3DO offers me a job, so now I go to 3DO. I'm at 3DO for 18 months.
With good old Trip Hawkins.
I've shut down so many studios. It's ridiculous.
You've got a bit of a curse, haven't you?
I do, yeah. I'm the Madden curse for these companies. So yeah, 3DO starts to year and a half there, and they start to go down the tubes. And
oh man.
So I'm kind of hop, skipping, and jumping around the industry. Well, at some point, right after 3DO was up till about 2001. Then I go to Digital Eclipse, and I really thought Digital Eclipse was going to be a place I stayed for quite a while. And even they had some turbulence, because at one point in time they were this very Game Boy focused studio, and then they wanted to transition into proper platform games, GameCube, N60. No, it wasn't N64 at the time. It was a GameCube with Death Jr. Was that game that they did? Was that the first foray from the lower tier stuff to this, AAA stuff? And there was some whole thing I probably shouldn't get into, but there was something that happened there that was weird. I actually ended up getting fired from that job.
Right.
I'm still friends with Micah. We're cool. Everything. It was just a weird scenario. Something very strange happened, and it just, whatever it was, I'll just let that be to the past. But I don't work for Digital Eclipse anymore. And I'm kind of like, what do I do? Eric Wahlberg at some point around this period of time contacts me and says, hey man, I'm at EA. I'm working for Pogo. This place is great. I hear you need a job. Come interview. So I'm like, cool. So I go interview at Pogo. It actually goes really well. I get the job, and I'm at EA for 7 years. That's the longest. The longest I've been, and so by 7 years to the day. And that's the longest I've ever been at any one company. And I work for Pogo for 7 years, and I'm happy. Like, everything's great. Like, I'm getting a chance to do these more, I believe me, the only thing I ever thought I wanted to do in life was make a fighting game. I've got to make a fighting game. But
Fight for Life. Does that not count then?
I didn't design that game.
No, that's
true.
It
doesn't count. I had all these crazy ideas I wanted to try, but that's not happening. But casual, I could really sink my teeth into this. I'd done a game at 3DO. It was casual based, big compilation of games, and so they kind of were like, "Oh, I think you might know what you're doing with card games." And I played, like family get-togethers. We would play bingo, and we would play this other game called Pokino. We're gamers, like, just naturally, right? Like, my whole family, whether it's video games or other games, we're just like that. And so I had this kind of insight into casual. I played solitaire. This is not a lot of things that AAA game developers are necessarily into, and it turns out to be a good fit. So I go to Pogo. I'm real happy. We're making solitaires. I'm making bingos. I'm making all sorts of offshoot bowling game there. It was great. And then, about 7 years into that, Pogo starts to change direction, and they're not going to design anything new. And all I want to, I'm at this point, I had transitioned from producer to designer. Well, what does a designer do if there's no games to design? Not much.
No.
So Pogo ends. I end up at a casino game company, because Pogo's done some casino stuff, and IGT seems to think I know what I'm talking about. So I go to IGT for about a year. And then I get a phone call from iWin, who is a Pogo competitor, and CJ's been trying to get somebody to kind of help, really solidify. HTML5 transition is happening at this point, right? Flash is going to die. All these games online are Flash games.
Yeah.
HTML5 is the future. Guess what? I've had some HTML5 experience. Come in and build our, HTML5 game studio up from the ground. So cool. I come in and I do that for 2 years. 2 years goes by. iWin's not happening anymore. Hey, Pogo, what's up? Go back to Pogo for 18 months. And then I actually ended up in a position where a lot of things happened in my personal life that really changed a lot for me. My mom started having health problems.
Right.
Thomas started having seizures. It was really rough, and it was too much pressure. Like EA like Pogo as a unit inside of EA is very unique. They're kind of isolated from a lot of they had historically were kind of isolated from the pressures of
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But it became a thing where I was like, hey, Pogo's now got expectations on it. These guys need to make good with this, effort, this new website and this new tech. And it was kind of a lot of like, it felt really stressful. And then on top of that, adding all these personal things, I broke down. I literally had my first nervous breakdown of my life, and I couldn't sleep. For the first real time as an adult, I had anxiety. It was crushing, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. So it turned out that somebody that I knew, independently was needing some help, and I was like, okay, I think I could do that. So I started working from home in 2018, way before pandemic times. And I've been doing that ever since. So I'm sort of like, I'm technically an independent,
freelance kind of.
Yeah, I have my own company that I just basically, I don't want to say shell company, but it's my company. But I don't work for me per se. I work for this other group, and he pays me, and that's kind of how that relationship works. So I'm, I don't have like benefits. I don't have, this is all stuff we have to kind of sort out on our own. So I'm effectively an independent contractor, but But so I have basically an independent contractor group company with one client. So that's kind of how
really
I roll right now.
Yeah.
But it works, and it gave me. It really was a godsend in a lot of ways, in the sense that I just didn't know how I was really going to move forward from that. It was the first time in my life where I'd been that uncertain about things, had that much pressure on me, and I have a family. Like, it's not just me that I have to take care of anymore. It's it's him, it's my wife, it's the other kids. My wife has 5 kids. Thomas is her 5th and final. But there's 4 other kids, and they range in age now from Thomas is 9, Angela's oldest is 22.
Wow, yeah.
And it's like, it's not just about me. And it was tough because leaving EA means, hey, I left stock options on the table. I left benefits on the table. But for me, it was a survival mechanism, really. I was at a point where I was just like, I must have gotten in 3 or 4 car accidents.
Blimey, Joe.
Just falling asleep at the wheel. It was tough, dude. I'm sorry. I apologize if it's kind of weird for me to.
No. I really appreciate your honesty
like this, because I don't know. How, aside from you, I don't know anybody else who's listening to this. But it's like life has a real interesting way of being life to you at times when you don't need that. And I just feel fortunate that I've been surrounded. My family's great. My friends are amazing. I've really had a lot of support. When Thomas was first having seizures, Dave Gray comes from out of nowhere. He's like, dude, I'm going to be at the hospital in 5 minutes. And he couldn't even go back and see him, and he couldn't even stay very long. He's just like, dude, I just want I'm here for you. So, I'm just super, super fortunate and lucky to have, the people in my life that I do. And like I said, dude, I'm just some schmo, man. Like, I don't know. I tell my good friend Katie, who I just saw, I've been friends with her since I was 8 years old. So we're going on 40 years. I just saw her the other day, and I'm like, I tell her sometimes, like, I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I'm just thankful that you guys are here for me, so.
Well, I love the honest answer, John. It's so, I
don't know how to not be, dude. Like,
no, it's really...
I'm not drinking that much. I'm drinking a little bit. I'm not drinking that much. But I mean,
I'm happy. I'm glad you're in a better place now. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. It's hard for me. I don't want to be like that, closed book, mysterious dude. Like, especially, and a lot of it's age, I think now, especially realizing, like, I'm not to say I'm old. I feel young in the sense that, okay, I'm not 50 yet. not that 50's you're
Yeah.
old after 50. I'm just saying, like, I didn't even conceive when I was younger, like, oh, I'm going to be in the industry for 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
be,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like I started at Sega before I was 20. So I'll
That's
be
mad,
30
yeah.
years in the industry before I'm 50. And I don't feel that much different than I did then in terms of, you know, I still have things I want to do and I still have passions and I still have,
Yeah.
you know, goals, but it's different now. It's tempered. It's not as like, I'm not freaking out over like, I have to do this tomorrow. I know I don't have a lot of time necessarily grand scheme to do things. I may not have 30 more years in front of me. Maybe I do.
Mm.
I don't know yet. But I'm not like, I don't feel so much different. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like experience means a lot. And when you're young and you're inexperienced, you do stupid things. You know, it's like I can kind of avoid some of those. Not to say I don't do stupid things, believe me, but you can avoid some of those landmines.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole untold story about the whole thing with me and Mike. You know, at Eternal Champions thing that I'll have to get it to you with another time. But it's like, you know, it's like I try to at least, you know, learn what I can from these moments, you know, and
Yeah, the big things that happen in your life.
I
Yeah, I
stepped.
get
Oh,
it.
I stepped in it that. Let me not step in it like that again. You know, like,
Yeah.
but you know, but I just consider myself really lucky, man. Like I said,
Bless you, yeah.
fortunate to be in the position I'm in, to know the people I know, um, and just what I want to do with it is more now is like, you know, share these things, right? Like the whole Twitter thing, right? It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how really interesting this stuff is, but man, I find it fascinating, and I want to share it because maybe somebody else will find it fascinating too.
So Joe, what you want to tell? Because I follow you now, but I didn't. It took me a little while to find it, so I'd love to like you share the handle on exactly. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain what it is?
So on Twitter, and I'm kind of debating. I don't know if Twitter's really the best format for it. Maybe Instagram is. I don't know. But on Twitter, I started a new account. It's called at Joe's Rare Wares.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a funny. Dave was like, "Why did you use wares?" I'm like, "I don't mean it like that." Because wares was like, you know, code back in the day for pirating games. But by wares I mean just stuff, right?
Yeah,
Rare
yeah.
stuff, and mostly it's games. But I have a ton of just esoteric. I'm a very esoteric person, with a lot of weird stuff, and it's kind of just like whatever. Again, it's like shiny thing. Oh, that's fascinating to me. Like I just bought. I not even kidding. I just bought online. Somebody had a prototype Game Gear board, not the system, but
Nice.
a soccer game, prototype soccer game for Game Gear. And I'm like, I
That's
have to
mad.
own this. So, and like a rental unit. It's also like a rental unit Mega Drive.
Oh, how cool is that?
I'm like, what is that? I've never seen. I gotta buy that. I'm like literally squirrel, you know, like just grab it. So, but for me, it's like I've had a lot of this stuff for years, right?
Mm.
One thing I want to share with you, actually, here it is. Okay, so this came off. I haven't set this one up yet, so this will be a preview. This came off of at Sega. We used to have they'd have meeting rooms, and at one point in time, some of the meeting rooms became testing rooms because we had too many people for the space that we had.
Mm.
This little guy came off of the this was the name of the meeting room.
Oh, wow.
This was the little, and it's like, you know, it's not paper. This is
it says like, for our listeners on the podcast,
yeah, Under the Sea,
yeah,
which is from Little Mermaid. So at the time, Sega was doing Little Mermaid stuff. This is an actual, like, you know, it's etched. It's etched. It's not written. It's not scratched. It's etched. Like somebody actually went to a printer and made this thing. And this was from the door of the identify. I yanked it. Well, we were leaving that building. And I'm like, I want that. Whoop! Grabbed it.
Oh, it's so cool.
But stuff like that, you know. And I have like, I didn't bring it with me. I should have. I have my lanyard from when I went to the Rock the Rock promotion with MTV. I have the Sega, the Sonic and Knuckles dog tag from that. I have a Sonic. It's like kind of a cheapy little plastic watch, but I have a Sonic and Knuckles watch. which I haven't
From
posted
the
yet.
90s. Yeah.
Dude, I've got so much stuff, and it's like some stuff was sort of like I didn't really necessarily know at any point in time that somebody else would look at this and think, "Oh, that's valuable or cool or whatever."
Yeah, I bet some of
It's
it's
my history, dude. Like that's like
yeah.
I really wanted to preserve for me this stuff, but now that I'm seeing that so many people are really like like love this stuff, right? Like, and it's like I feel bad in some ways saying like, oh, Atari will never be what Atari was, Sega will never be what Sega was. I know why people want it to be that way, and I appreciate their passion for it.
Yeah.
My piece of history that I can share with people is this is the part that I got to see, right? This is what I was exposed to.
Yeah.
And I think people it's so funny. I'll talk to people like, oh my God, that's so cool, or that's so awesome you got to be a part of that. I'm like, yeah, it was. And I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I'm jazzed to see their reaction to it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm jazzed to see people get excited about like, oh my God, I've never seen that before. Recently I bought all these Genesis games that were sealed, and it was like a weird thing where this guy was, posting stuff on Facebook Marketplace. It was like some other stuff that he was posting, some games that weren't sealed, and I was like, oh, these are great. He's like, hey, are you interested in anything else? I have more stuff. I'm like, what do you have? Sends me the list, and I'm like, holy shit!
Please, Joe.
Oh,
some of these games.
Okay, wait. I got them
because
here.
there's some extremely rare games
I got
that you
some
posted.
here. Okay, hold on. So here's Landstalker. I just had this graded.
That is sealed, yeah.
It's sealed, and it only has really one flaw that I could see in the wrap. You can kind of see it by the one player.
Mad.
It's got a little tear.
Yep.
This I picked this up. I got let's see. Oh, this is the crown jewel, by the way, which I didn't even know at the time. How about a sealed Ghouls and Ghosts for Genesis?
That's amazing.
Which got a very, very nice grade. Not as awesome as I was hoping, but still very nice.
9.6. So yeah, you get them sent away, don't you? And they sort of.
Yes, this was a whole process, man. It was really, and I was very fortunate. There was a guy who is like a real expert who happens to live very close to me, who I went to and showed this stuff to, and he was like, he wasn't like, oh, let me buy this from you. He was like, oh wow, man, this is really cool. Like you should do this, and this with it. I'm like, great, thank you. So he sort of sent me on my way with grading, and I have another box here that's all the stuff that I haven't had graded yet. In amongst this box are some real nice.
Yeah, look at that, proper Genesis classics.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably tested some of these games, didn't you?
I did, and that's why. And that's actually why it's hard to let some of these go, right? Like,
yeah.
I was the lead tester on Sonic Spinball.
Yep.
I tested, Little Mermaid. See, here, I'm going to pair this up. Little Mermaid, Under the Sea.
Under the Sea, there you go. There's a connection there.
So, and it's like, yeah, so some of this stuff is going to be hard to let go of, but I'm excited by the fact that, like, I can, sort of like, there's this one guy who really wants the Landstalker. He really wants the Landstalker. Like, he's so excited about the Landstalker, he's going to trade me his lesser graded Landstalker and give me money to buy my Landstalker.
Are you tempted then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. But I mean, but I also don't want it to be like this whole thing where it's just like about profit, right? Like,
no.
So this kid who sold me this stuff, his uncle collected it, and his uncle unexpectedly passed away. He has an estate with a whole bunch of other stuff, and coins and the house and whatever other, fine furnishings he had. Yeah. And his mom, I guess this guy's mom, who was this guy's sister, the guy I was talking to, his mom, who was this man's collector's sister, was like, oh, what's this stuff? Just, whatever. And the kid was like, I think this might be worth something. And we're both kind of coming at it completely stupid, right? Like, I have no real idea what this stuff is worth, and he doesn't either. And so we come up with a deal, and I take the stuff and I start looking at it, and I'm like, I think there's something here, and so I take it to Alan. He looks at it. He says, wow, man, you've really got some amazing stuff here. You really should. And I know there's a lot of controversy with the grading. I wasn't intending to use WADA originally. I wanted to use VGA. I'd heard about all this stuff, and I couldn't even create, like, I don't mean to disparage any. I couldn't create an account on VGA. I couldn't even, like, their website was so busted. I couldn't even make. So how am I going to send them anything? I can't. WADA, it's like, hey, what system do you have? What game is it? How do you want to do this? Okay, pay us money and send it to us, and we'll do it. Okay, great. That's easy.
Yeah,
so so I did that, and I may do more later. We'll see. But I just wanted to kind of get my feet wet and understand how this works. And Ghouls and Ghosts, for what it is, I mean, quite frankly, it's worth especially graded, worth way the hell more than I paid for it. So it's fascinating, and the part of it to me that's really cool is, like, I know people who have stuff like this.
Yeah,
and I'm not trying to be a vulture. I don't want to come in, but, like, what makes me sad, like viscerally sad, is knowing that, like, Michael Latham passed away and almost all of his stuff is just going to vanish. Like, it's just going to disappear into the ether, right? He had crazy stuff. My friend Keith Higashihara, who we found out there was a Sega reunion in 2019, and, like, maybe a few months before that, he had passed away. And all he had, Adrian, I'm not even kidding, dude. He had everything. I'm not saying necessarily sealed, but he just had, like, he was, like, collecting Atari 2600 stuff back in the Yahoo Groups days from, like, early 2000s. Yeah. He had everything. And somebody, his mom, and, in her grief, I understand, like, you don't know what this stuff is, but, somebody please come and take this all away.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, his entire, like, all this effort and energy he put into collecting this stuff, I don't want it for me. But somebody who could really appreciate it.
You want to look after it.
A museum, like, send it off to, Video Game History Museum, museum, or the History Foundation, or whatever, right? But don't just...
Or keep it for your family, at least. Like, properly.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not going to get rid of all that. I mean, some of this stuff I'm definitely keeping. Yeah. Like, I mean, believe me, I live in California. It's expensive. I have bills to pay. So I will probably sell some of it. But I want to do right also by those people, right? I already offer. I was like, hey man, I'm going to get some of this stuff graded. Would you want one of them? Like, maybe I could, you have some other stuff left over. I could give you one of these really cool graded games, and then you can frame that and be like, show your mom, like, hey man, this guy's efforts were really, like, amazing, actually. Because I think that's the sad thing too, is sometimes people look at it, it's like they just look at it like it's junk. Yeah. And it's really not. It's really not junk.
It's like when you were in that Jaguar warehouse, Atari warehouse.
Oh my god,
that was junk back then, wasn't it? And
it was to me, and I'm an idiot. But it was the, again, we're prisoners of the moment, right? Like,
yeah.
If anybody really had the foresight, I mean, a lot of the guys that do this stuff, it's passion for them, right? They love this stuff, and they've been doing it for 20, 30 years, and they didn't care if it was worth any money. They wanted that thing because it meant it was. It's why it's funny. So Dave Gray and I have this sort of existential argument of emulation versus the real thing.
Original, yeah.
And he's hardcore on emulation. And dude, Dave Gray is literally the hardest working, aside from my brother. Dave Gray is the hardest working human being I've ever met in my life. That guy is so dedicated to what he does. And, Dave, I hope you're listening, Dave. I love you, dude. You're like my other brother. That guy is amazing. And he has curated literally thousands of ROMs for his, main project. And I'm not even talking about, like, just he's played every single one of them. He's gotten the art for every single one of them. He is a mad genius of some level. And he's so dedicated to it, and it's largely for him and, for his friends. But I mean, he is super dedicated to that. But to me, it's like, it's cool that he has it. And I like the idea that, hey, I could go pick up this Pi project tomorrow. What game do I want to play? It's there, right?
Yeah,
awesome. I can check it out.
Yeah.
But the visceral object, the physical thing, I have no space in my garage because I collect arcade games.
So
and I'm talking about the full size. I have a gauntlet. Like right now in my garage, I have a gauntlet. I have a pole position. Nice. I have a pinball machine. My favorite pinball machine is Paragon, which I don't know if anybody knows, but I have that in my garage. My wife's favorite game growing up was a game called Crossbow. We have that in the garage. I have a Tempest. I have a bunch of cocktail. I have so much stuff I have to get a storage unit because I can't keep it all in my garage and still be able to park the cars. But like, to me, when I see those things and when I touch those things, that's the thing that triggers the nostalgia for me. Not
Yeah.
so much. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
playing the game does,
Yeah.
but like I can remember physically, like so when I was a kid, there was an arcade near my house, and I used to go play. And they had a Mr. Do machine, or Mr. Doe. I don't know what people say, but it's Mr. Do to me. And it's a really fun game. And I was a broke kid who barely got some quarters every so often,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
One day I'm sitting there and I'm bored, and I had a penny in my hand. And I'm like, I wonder if there's some way I could get a credit with this penny. So I'm throwing the penny at it, and I spin the penny a certain way and into the slot, and I get a credit.
Nice.
And I'm like,
Eureka.
what's up? So now I'm like focused on getting pennies.
Nice. Yeah.
To the point where one day I go to the counter at the pizza restaurant where this machine is, and I say, "Can I get 25 pennies for this quarter, please?" And they're like, "It's you."
Busted.
I busted myself.
Joe.
And then so then I go to the grocery store down the street, and they're like, "Oh, you're that kid they told us not to give pennies to." Damn it. So yeah, I wrecked myself on that one. But I mean,
man.
that was my dude. So that if I ever got a Mr. Do cocktail machine, dude, that would be like the first thing that'd be in my head was like,
put the pennies in.
But those experiences and those things that give you those experiences, like those are the most valuable things to me. So when Franz offered to sell me his, Xevious field test unit, so the unit that Atari used in arcades to make sure that people would like love this game and want to play it and check and see how much money it made. He's like, "Hey, I'll sell this to you." I'm like, "Name your price, dude. Like, what do you want?"
Nice.
Same thing with his Crystal Castles, which I almost bought until his wife said, "No, you can't sell that." But he's like, "Dude," he's like, "I'm not going to sell it to anybody else." He said, "And if push comes to shove, I'll will it to you." I said, "Thank you very much." But that machine means a ton to me because I remember that experience in the arcade, seeing this glowing trackball and this game that played this cool music and it was isometric, and I have an opportunity to own the thing that was the thing before it was the thing, like, and I worked with the guy, and it's like, dude, I can't even believe my good fortune sometimes, dude. It's like, it's just amazing that I've been able to, make these connections and be in these places and have the opportunity to have these things. And I don't mean to be, what's the word? Material about it, right? I don't mean to be like greedy and like, oh, this is my thing. But it's like it is precious to me in the sense of like, it's this piece of history. It's this thing that like I can say doesn't exist anywhere else, right? This is unique, and this is cool and special, and I want to share it. I don't want to be like the guy who's like, oh, it's mine, and
lock it up, be
jealous of me, or it's like I want other people who love it to geek out about it, right? Like my whole thing, like, and dude, I believe me, I'm the biggest geek in every sense of geek you can imagine. in terms of I was a nerd before being a nerd was cool, right? Like in school, like computers were like, oh, you're a nerd, and the whole time I'm like, dude, in 20 years you're gonna come talking to me about computers, and sure as shit, here we are. But I mean, dude, I'm like, Dave Gray was, we play air hockey at like the most professional level you can play it at. Not that we make money from it, but from the fact that we take it as a sport and we're serious about it. We practice, we geek out, we study film. Like it's not just a thing that's like, oh, we just whap it back and forth real hard. Like we take it seriously, and like that level of thing for me, but again, it's all about that passion for that thing, right? There's no living to be made playing air hockey, but I would take trips to Vegas. I'd take time off work, take trips to Vegas, pay for hotel lodging, travel, everything, just to go play in that tournament for 3 days and be with my sort of second family there, right, or third family. Because I've got my friends and family, personal. I've got my Sega and my other folks, and then there's air hockey thing, which is, again, it's just like another extended part of our unit that we all share this passion, right? And I look at it the same way for this, right? Like somehow or another, through the mystical forces that be, you made contacts with people you made contacts with, who made contacts with people I know, and now we're connected. And it's like funny, we share this passion for this thing, right? That all these other people who are listening share too. and I look at it as almost a duty, right, to show these things to people that may not even know exist. And it's like, wow, this is so cool, right? Like, you know, and as much as I'd love to see it succeed too, like with air hockey, right? It's going to be on ESPN. Cool,
Oh,
great.
nice.
Maybe people will see it, and hopefully they all do, and they all want to play and love it, right? Same thing with this game stuff. Hopefully people see things they've never seen before, and they're like, wow, and it motivates somebody to do something that, you know, they might not do otherwise. You know, one of the guys in test, we had this. There was this piece of hardware which I'm looking for. If anybody knows where to find a Sega Genesis address checker, look me up. I want one. But Brian Dawson, who was a former tester, he got to test on an address checker, and it got his mind working a certain way to where he was like, how does this stuff work underneath the hood? And he basically built his whole career on becoming like a engineering focus based on his exposure to that one thing.
That's crazy,
right? So it's like you just never know what connections are going to be made, and I guess I just want to be the, you know, a source of information, a source of interesting things, because maybe somebody somewhere will see something and be like, yeah, I got contacted on Reddit by some person who was like, oh man, I used to play Gubble all the time. I really love that game. I just wanted to, you know, send you some good vibes. You know, thanks for all the the cool memories from when I was a kid. I was like, dude, awesome. And then like I responded, never said anything back. I was like, I want to know more. But you know, it's you just like you put stuff out there, you just never know
where it can go,
who it's going to touch or how it's going to impact somebody. So that's why I started the Twitter thing, right? It's like, I don't know who's going to see this, but you know, sometimes I'll put something out and maybe it's that thing that somebody's been looking for, or they didn't know that existed, or whatever.
It's like the MC Hammer story. I wasn't going to ask you that question until I saw your tweet about it. So I thought,
right, yeah, yeah, and that was a fantastic moment, dude. I actually, funny thing was, I actually tweeted to him about it. He's like, I was like, do you remember this thing? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh. And then of course he's got 8 million other people to talk to, so never.
Did he actually reply to you then? MC
he
Hammer?
Did, yeah, he actually did, yeah. Well, remember that? So there was that whole story about Hammer and the bet, the thing. Eric, I love you, and I'm not trying to drag them. There was a little bit of an inaccuracy in that story, so it was like, I always want to set the record straight, and I've tried. I actually went to Ed and said, Ed, talk to Tom Kalinske about this and try to verify this story, and he couldn't quite get it right. Couldn't quite verify what I remembered about it, but as I recalled it, there was a bet that was made. Hammer won some money off of shutting Keith out, and that was a big deal, because when Keith came back to us, he was like, his tail between his legs. He's like, dude, Hammer killed me. He was doing pass. Hammer figured out. Well, apparently Hammer played this game all the time. That was
right,
and apparently he figured out how to commit pass interference without getting a penalty for it. So Keith was like, dude, he was just interfering with him all the time, and then he was trying to score, and Hammer like blocked his field goal, so Keith couldn't even score a point. And that was the bet. Was he was going to shut him out in the second half.
Yeah.
And he ended up doing it. And he was like, yeah, I was trying to kick a field goal just to see if I could score a point. He blocked my field goal. I was like, it's crazy. It's funny because I heard Ed's podcast with you too. And, you know, talking about these, you know, these celebrities that know this stuff, man. They played these things.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's an interesting, it's like the overlap of these worlds, right? Where you wouldn't think that these people would care about this stuff or be interested, but you know, like video games are a really unique and interesting language all of its own that there really isn't duplicated anywhere.
Yeah.
The interactive thing about it, and it's cool how it touches different people, and to, you know, to hear that, you know, I'm glad you guys. I didn't know Ed ever met with Michael Jackson until I listened to that podcast. That was fantastic.
Yeah, he was Ed Annunziata he was a great guest, actually.
He's great. They're all great, dude.
He's a friend of yours, isn't he? Said,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, they're all great, and you know, I feel fortunate, you know, again to have these people, had them in my life and still have them in my life, right? Still have them be, you know, people.
Joe, mate, the games that you worked on, and Ed and Mike, you know, I played as a kid, so it's bizarre for me to talk to you, and I have to pinch myself, to be honest, sometimes.
Well, and we were young, dude. I mean,
yeah.
You know, Ed's maybe not quite 10 years older than me, or about. So yeah, I mean, these guys were all in like their late 20s, early 30s when they were doing this stuff. So I think it's great. I think it's great that, And what's really been interesting to me in this whole like gaming thing, finding these old classic games that are sealed. The people that are like into this stuff, they're young. Some of them are really young.
Yeah,
They're like 20
surprisingly, yeah.
somethings in there.
Mm.
So they're appreciating, these things that were built before they were even born.
It's true, yeah.
Right.
And that's great, isn't it? That is
Oh,
great.
absolutely. I mean, like, so I was born in 73. So, I didn't miss too much of the interact. And, so stuff from that era, it actually is absolutely interesting to me, but it wasn't so far away
Yeah.
from when I was born that it was like super foreign, right? Like I was playing Pong clones and stuff when I was, 7, 8 years old. I was, standing on crates and playing pinball when I was 3 or 4. So, I mean, I've been around this stuff forever, but it's cool to see people who this whole thing passed them up, and the world is very modern and in a lot of ways much better, right? All these experiences they can play on their PC on high def screens and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But they have this appreciation for this art that happened. And it was art. I mean, it really was art. I don't know if you've seen those like comparisons where they show what a game looks like when it's on like the super highest fidelity, like scaler, so that it looks great for HD TVs versus what it looks like on a CRT, where they were expecting things to blur.
Yeah.
And that's how they were getting things to look a certain way. Like that is amazing to me. And it didn't happen on accident. People had to learn how to do that. That was a technique, right? So people have appreciation for that. That to me is awesome, right? And they know that like, a lot of these games, they were built in assembler, right? They weren't built with, hey, here's Unity. Hey, here's,
it's a
whatever
different world,
engine, right? It was like literally bits built bit by bit. And these guys were crafting technique at the moment they were doing it. It was really amazing.
I just remember when we had Bill Raybock on the podcast, he was talking about, is it John McCormack, was it? The guy that made Doom? what's his name?
No, you're right. Carmack.
Carmack. I mean, just hearing Bill's story about how he got Doom working on the Jaguar, and it's just almost an impossible mission, but he did it somehow. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, there was a series, and I think you can get to these now. GDC had these talks, like postmortems of classic games. Listen to David Crane's talk about Pitfall.
Yeah, I know.
It's dude, they're squeezing bits out of he's like, oh, if you look at the trees, it's actually Pitfall Harry's legs turned upside down, or the branches. Like, dude, these guys were cobbling things together, and like, oh, I had to write this thing so it hit the V blank just so, and I'm like, what the fuck is a V blank? Like, I don't. But it's wild, dude. It's like these guys were literally artists. Like they were really doing some amazing things. And as much as I would give Tripp bullshit, or shit for what he did with 3DO, like what he did with EA was amazing, right? Like this idea of these people as artists, right?
Yeah,
trying to give them equal billing to like engineers giving equal billing to recording artists, right? Like. In a lot of ways, it was like that. There were styles. There were people that had, hey, this is the kind of thing I'm going to make, and they had very intentful purpose behind what they were doing. It's crazy. When I used to work at that building, they actually had a wall up of all the original games that were done, and stories about that stuff. And it was like, man, I appreciated the fact. You can say what you want about EA, right, and their business practices and whatever. But they actually do have an appreciation for their past. And I love that. Like, I love being able to go to the hallway where they had all these, like,
and just admire the
games, behind plexiglass, preserved forever. This was our history, right? Like, that to me is super cool.
Did you work with Tripp at all closely, or not really? Or
no, I mean, obviously EA was past his time. When I was at 3D, I was at 3DO, he was still there. I mean, I think he was at 3DO till the end. I only heard stories really. And it's tough because then he went on to Digital Chocolate, which was the early mobile stuff. And my friend Dermot, who was another QA guy, worked for him there. It was sort of a continuation of like, I just sort of felt more like, I felt bad for him in a sense that it sort of seemed like he was sort of chasing that brass ring. He really wanted to kind of get back to what he had captured with EA. And in some respects, EA succeeded in spite of his, like I think he had a vision to a certain point, and then EA was like, "Oh, we can do this with that," and he sort of got supplanted. I don't think they needed him to continue to build EA into what it is today. But that seed was planted, and I think he's a big ideas guy. I think he's like
yeah. Well, I've spoken to him in the past, Joe. Yeah, he's very kind of philosophical and
right.
quite a deep man, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that he's wrong in a lot of ways, but I think the way he went about certain things, like I'm at 3DO when Army Men is happening.
Yes.
And I don't understand why there's another Army Men game coming out. It's like we've done this. Can we do something else? But that's not, but I'm looking at that from a creative standpoint. He's looking at it from a business standpoint.
Sure.
And those things don't always meet up. It's like as much as I want to be this purist, I understand. Dave Gray, I think, talked about this too. Where like Michael Latham was saying, we're here to make money. Yes, right. I think we're here to make people happy. And if we can make some money while we're doing it, then that's also awesome. But if you don't make people happy, you can make all the money you want. They're going to walk away.
Yeah, they're not going to come
aren't
back.
going to make any more money after that. So you better not alienate them if you can. And I just felt like what 3DO was doing a lot of cases was, okay, we made more of this thing, but is this really what people want? Like I just sort of felt like it was a one trick pony that kind of got ridden too much. And I think it proved out in the end that was not going to be successful. But I could well have been wrong. I never thought cell phone cameras were going to be a thing, and here we are. So
yes, man.
I was like, why do you need a camera on your cell phone? Just get a camera. And then I'm like, and fast forward to 8 million videos of things happening right when they happen.
That's right. Yeah,
dummy. Like, of course, that's why. So.
Oh, Jay, look, we spoke for about 2 hours now. I think this might be.
Oh man, I
can wrap this
up.
You
know what? Listen, Adrian, if you got to tap out, bro, then you tap out. I know it's late for you.
But thank you so much, though, Joe. You've been such a great guest.
Anytime.
So
hey,
fun.
Listen, if there's anything, and I'm happy to continue on with anything you want to talk about. Like I said, I feel really lucky, and I'm happy to share my experience. What's fun for me is when I hear people say, "Oh man, that was really cool. Like I didn't know about that, or that was a cool thing." Like I want to be more of a source for that.
Yeah.
I did this thing. It was really cool. I was very lucky. And I just know that there's people that appreciate those stories, right? And to be able to, so it's an honor for me and a privilege to be able to share that stuff. And I really hope people enjoy it. I gotta tell you, get to know me long enough, I'll start to irritate you. But I hope there's some value in this, and people really get a chance to.
I think that. I think you spoke really well, Joe. And I think, you give some great stories, and I really appreciate your honesty as well. The final question,
and my inability to censor myself.
That's fine. My final question we ask all our guests is quite a tough one, actually. But if you could share a few drinks,
yes, it is.
Any video game character, who would you choose and why?
Okay, so I remember my answer for this from the other podcast.
Ask you before, didn't I?
It was Gordon Freeman. I was thinking about it again, and it's a tough one because I'm trying to think of at first I was like, let me give him some kind of weird answer, like a Tetris piece. I want to have a drink with a Tetris piece.
Could you imagine?
But what I got to thinking about more was I was really starting to think of what was my earliest experience with a game that had a narrative, and that was Bard's Tale. So I thought there was an original sort of Bard character from the Bard's Tale. Now I may have been getting this mixed up because I was doing a little looking, and I guess there's a similar sort of. Apparently, even the town is the same name in Ultima,
right?
As it is in Bard's Tale, and apparently because they were working with the same consultant.
Interesting.
But so I suppose. In my mind, there is a Bard character from Bard's Tale, or any one of the characters that I used to play with, that I created and played that game with. It would be cool to have a discussion, to actually sit down and have a drink with a character who does drink for a living and tell stories for a living, a Bard from the Bard's Tale.
Do you know what? You would have a good night.
What's that?
That would be a good night, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah. My alternate answer, by the way, was I was thinking about video games in the general. There is somebody did make a Fix It Felix game, like an actual arcade Fix It Felix game. I would love to.
Ralph,
I get called Wreck-It Ralph sometimes. So although the Zangief, who was my favorite Street Fighter character, the Zangief from the Wreck-It Ralph universe.
Yes.
That might be a great guy to get a drink with.
Oh man, Joe.
Not that guy.
Yeah.
That guy, yeah.
Oh, Zangief, bless you.
Well, I almost had the strip on my head. Kept that. I could kind of pass for him, maybe.
Yeah, no. I mean, he's.
I won't. I will do you the favor of not showing you my chest hair right now. But I got to rep Bay Area.
For our viewers,
yes.
Explain the T-shirt because it's a bit.
Okay, hold on. Okay, glue. I need glue. Okay, this is Humphrey Hambone and Charlie Horse. So from Bay Area television in the late 70s, early 80s, this was like a set of characters that was they had their own show, but then they were also like doing these like public service announcement type things, like don't be a bully or ask before you borrow something because otherwise it's like stealing. And so it was like life lessons, right, from these two characters. And I know not too many people have this shirt. So in the spirit of Joe's rare stuff, this is my rare stuff shirt of Humphrey and Charlie, and they're Bay Area legends.
Yeah.
The word that you've used, which I love. By the way, the word legend to me, when you say that, it carries so much weight. I'm like, dude, I don't deserve that. But these guys are legends. These guys are. I'm just a dude. These are legends.
Joe. Oh, you're a gentleman. Well, we'll leave it there. And,
I appreciate you, Adrian. Thank you so much,
you're
man.
A gentleman.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been really fun.
Anytime you need me, man, give me a call.
Anytime.
All right.